WXOQ, Bristol, Vermont, WNYV, Whitehall, Glens Falls. It's 8 o'clock.
Good morning. This is Northern Light for Tuesday, November 21st. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe.
Ambulance companies in New York are praising a new law they say will help them better respond to emergencies.
Everybody always says, what does it cost to do an ambulance call? It isn't the cost of what it takes to take that call right now. It's the cost for the last 6 hours the ambulance has been sitting idle waiting to take the call also plays into that.
With people firing up their wood stoves, it's axe season in the North Country. A Paul Smiths professor wrote the book on all things axes.
You can spend a lot of time chopping down a tree and doing it ineffectively and slowly, or you can spend a bit of time sharpening your axe and take down that tree with relative ease.
We'll catch up on more news from throughout the region, and we'll hear the story of how the hermit thrush got its song from Mohawk storyteller Dave Fadden. All that and more is coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us.
Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions, longrunwealth.com, and Fisher, Bissett, Muldowney, and McCardle, attorneys and counselors at law with offices in Malone, Tupper Lake, and Saranac Lake. 800-941-5001.
This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. Ambulance companies in New York say a new law signed by Governor Hochul will help their struggling industry get needed resources to better respond to emergency calls. Karen DeWitt reports.
The law will ensure that ambulance companies that transport a sick or injured person to a hospital will now be directly paid for that service from that person's insurance company. Jeffrey Call, who's chair of the state's United Ambulance Network, also heads Guilfoyle Ambulance Service in Watertown, New York. He says while that might seem like a small change, it will end millions of dollars in lost payments to ambulance services. Call says when someone who lives, say, in Albany gets sick in Buffalo or on Long Island and needs an ambulance, that service can be considered out of network by some insurance companies.
When you call 911, there's no pre-screening for what kind of insurance do you have or are you in or out of our network.
But the ambulance companies still need to be paid for their services. Previously, the insurance company would mail the payment directly to the person who used the ambulance. And Call says often that money never made it to the ambulance company.
For many, many years, if you were out of network, most private insurance companies would send the check to the patient or the customer. And in some cases, those checks got lost in the mail. In some cases, those checks got cashed and the bills didn't get paid. So what this law does is it makes the insurance company mail the check to the ambulance provider versus the patient.
Call estimates the change will mean an additional $100,000 a year in payments to his company, which completes 12 to 15,000 service calls a year. He says the money is greatly needed at a time when volunteer ambulance companies are struggling to find enough drivers and EMTs to properly staff services. He says the ambulance companies would also be on better financial footing if the state's Medicaid reimbursement rates were higher. Call says the payments for services do not reflect what is known as the cost of readiness.
Everybody always says, what does it cost to do an ambulance call? It isn't the cost of what it takes to take that call right now. It's the cost for the last 6 hours the ambulance has been sitting idle waiting to take the call also plays into that.
He says the ambulance companies plan to ask Governor Hochul and the state legislature for better Medicaid reimbursement rates in 2024. And he says companies are also lobbying the federal government for a better rate of reimbursement from Medicare. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt.
Yorkers say the level of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in the state has risen since early October. That's when the terrorist group Hamas attacked Israel and ignited a deadly war. The Siena College Research Institute released a poll on the topic yesterday, led by Dr. Don Levy.
New Yorkers tend to side with the Israeli position. 59% feel as though Hamas's attacks on Israel, which resulted in the deaths of about 1,400 Israeli citizens, should be condemned without any hesitation, without any explanation, as opposed to 25%, by no means a small percentage of New Yorkers, a quarter of New Yorkers, who say, while they condemn the death of citizens, they feel as though it was the result of decades of Israel's treatment of the Palestinians.
According to the latest death polls, more than 13,000 Palestinians and 1,300 Israelis have been killed during the Israel-Hamas conflict.
A measure that has allowed survivors of sexual assault to sue their abusers beyond the statute of limitations is coming to an end this week. The Adult Survivors Act was in effect for 1 year and led to over 2,500 lawsuits in New York. The majority of cases were against the state over alleged abuse in the state's prisons and jails. Former President Donald Trump and comedian Russell Brand were also accused under the act. After Thursday, lawsuits over sexual assault will again be subject to the statute of limitations.
And new data from the U.S. Department of Education shows a jump in the number of public schools in New York with police officers in them. That's largely due to new reporting from schools in the city. Anna Williams-Bergen has more.
About half of public schools in New York have police officers working at least part-time. Between 2017 and 2020, the number of schools with police presence increased from 14 to 53%. That's much higher than the national average. Across the U.S., only about one-third of public schools have police officers, though most states have seen an increase. In New York State, part of that increase is because New York City had been underreporting their police presence, according to the ACLU. Anna Williams-Bergen, North Country Public Radio.
You're listening to Northern Light on North Country Public Radio. It's 7 minutes past 8. Good morning. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up, we'll sit down with Mohawk storyteller Dave Fadden to hear the story about how the hermit thrush got its song. That's coming up in just a couple of minutes right here on Northern Light.
Music by Wickmore Jazz Trio out of Plattsburgh. Northern Light is supported by Adirondack Foundation and the Adirondack Birth to Three Alliance, dedicated to providing all children the best possible start in life. AdirondackBT3.org. Highs today around 40 and a mix of sun and clouds. Wintry mix along eastern Lake Ontario, Tug Hill, Boonville this afternoon. Maybe some rain across the region tomorrow. Highs around 40 today, lows around 20 tonight, and highs in the 40s tomorrow.
If you heat your home with wood, you've probably already broken out the old trusty axe to get the wood pile in shape. A professor at Paul Smith College has collected some 200 axes from the past and present. He even wrote the book on the subject. David Summerstein has this profile.
Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. That's Abraham Lincoln.
Here we go. Nice long strokes.
And that's Brett McLeod in his shop in the basement of Paul Smith College's forestry cabin, doing what any wise woodchopper should do.
We go from the heel of the axe to the toe, back and forth.
He glides a sharpening stone gently along an axe blade.
You can spend a lot of time chopping down a tree and doing it ineffectively and slowly, or you can spend a bit of time sharpening your axe and take down that tree with relative ease.
McLeod even owns what's known as a Lincoln axe from the early 1900s, as trustworthy as Honest Abe himself. It and the quote are featured in McLeod's book American Axe, The Tool That Shaped a Continent. At some point, McLeod says, we lost respect for the humble axe.
We replaced the axes with power saws, chainsaws, and so the axe, became relegated to a spot in the corner of the garage and pulled out when you needed to hit something hard.
As Paul Smith's professor of forestry, McLeod teaches all those ways to fell a tree. But it's the simple axe,
a wedge with an edge,
that's his passion.
I started collecting axes when I was about 5. My father had a side gig as an antique dealer, and so he was always scrounging through old barns, and invariably there'd be an old axe head sticking out of the dirt, and I started picking these up and cleaning them up, and then learned that they were not just old hunks of metal, but they had really interesting history behind them as well.
McLeod's book is filled with that history and beautiful photographs of his collection from a time when people used axes for survival, for shelter, food, and work.
Axes became status symbols, so you had sort of the Cadillac of axes, which would be something like a black raven axe with its embossing. That's on the cover of the book. Other axes were plain Jane, no markings whatsoever, purely utilitarian, and they were, of course, sort of the pickup truck of the axe world, meant to just get it done.
He has a bow tie-shaped Seeger chemical axe, perfect for throwing, and stamped with its year of manufacture, so also perfect for collecting.
Much as folks do, say, vertical collections of wine, where they try to collect every year, people will do vertical collections of Sager axes, trying to get every year from 1914 on up.
And he has the more modern and vicious-looking Vermont racing axe, designed for competitive lumberjacking.
An axe like this one might chop through, say, a 12-inch log in something like 20 to 30 seconds. Not out of breath. Just nice, easy swings.
Outside, McLeod shows me proper chopping technique. Axes are no longer relegated to a corner of the garage. ESPN's Great Outdoor Games brings lumberjack sports to living rooms across the country, and urban axe throwing at bars is a thing.
It sounds like a very American combination to me.
There's a chapter in McLeod's book about that, too. But it's the axes themselves and McLeod's passion for them that really stands out.
How beautiful these really simple objects are. So we're surrounded by all kinds of stuff, and it's easy to not just sort of take the time to look at them, look at how they were made, look at the engravings or the etchings on them, and really sort of see where they fit into history.
In agriculture, in housing, in paper making, in sport, all made possible by a simple wedge with an edge.
Good exercise.
Yeah, it's good exercise. Yeah, I could do that all day long. I love it.
David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio, Paul Smith College.
You can see a photo of Brett McLeod's axe collection and watch a video of McLeod teaching how to throw an axe at a target on our website, ncpr.org. This story first aired in 2021.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up in just a minute, a story from Akwesasne Mohawk artist and storyteller Dave Fadden. That's coming up in just a minute. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note. We'll meet a bright red songbird that only sings on sunny mornings. That's coming up at 8:42. But first, Todd has a look at the weather for us.
The Weather Service says a mix of sun and clouds today. We've got clouds and a wintry mix along eastern Lake Ontario, the Tug Hill, the Thousand Islands, in the St. Lawrence Valley, partly cloudy with a chance of light sleet or snow later today. Highs near 40. In the Adirondacks, Glens Falls, Lake George, the Tri-Lakes area, sunshine today. Also sunny in the Champlain Valley today with highs around 40. Light winds out of the east-northeast. Rain in the forecast for tomorrow across all of the region with highs low 40s. And at this point, Thursday, Thanksgiving, partly to mostly cloudy, highs in the low 40s. Right now, partly cloudy, 23 degrees in Canton.
This morning, we're going to hear a story about how the hermit thrush got his song. Dave Fadden is an Akwesasne Mohawk artist and storyteller, and I caught up with him this summer at the museum he runs in Onchaota, the Six Nations Museum. And he says his love for storytelling is a deeply held tradition from his grandfather, Ray Fadden.
You know, my grandfather's probably one of the best storytellers I've ever heard. You know, he was very, very passionate about his, the culture and the stories. And, if he was talking to kids, he would be entertaining. And so I grew up hearing that my whole life. And, I reached a point in my life where it was going to be my turn. And I remember the day clearly. He came up to me and he goes, why don't you tell a story to these people? He goes, I'm tired, Okay, and so I didn't really want to, but I did it, and then it was awful. My delivery wasn't there yet, and then halfway through the story, I could smell his pipe, so I knew he was close by. But I went through it, and I finished the story. Again, it was a horrible delivery, but I knew the story, and then
because you'd heard it so many.
Oh yeah, it was there, but I just had to work on my style, I guess. And but afterwards, he came up to me and gave me a pat on the back, like a good job. But I still get nervous, big crowds. But once I start, it's like it goes away. That just shows you, just as a young person, just listening, you retain so much. And there's little things you forget, but I add my own 2 cents, and I come up with my own style. And so I just had a good teacher without even knowing it. Just being around him, I just soaked it up and got to a point where I was like, well, I guess it's my turn. Yeah.
Dave Fadden shared his story at the Six Nations Museum while he was sitting next to a small piece of white and blue beadwork that tells the story of how the hermit thrush got his song. That beadwork uses what's called pictographic writing, that uses beaded images to remind the viewer and the storyteller of the story.
If you see in this room, there's all this beadwork and the pictographs. And what that is called pictographic writing. And it was a way a lot of indigenous people and a lot of cultures actually around the world at some point in their history used as a means to record stories. And this isn't really like reading per se. All the images do is simply act as a note or a reminder of the story. So I could probably tell this without looking at it because I've told it so many times, but I always come back and refer to it. And a lot of these stories are for younger folks that, they're just beginning their lives, and they contain certain lessons and morals. But it begins here. And they say long ago, Sumquantis, or who we call the Creator, came down to the earth. And the earth is always symbolized by a giant turtle. And that's from our creation, where a woman fell from the sky above an upper world. And with her, she brought life. And there was all water. And a turtle came to the surface, and she landed on the turtle shell. And that turtle shell started to grow, and that became the continent, the land. So whenever you see a turtle, oftentimes it refers to the earth. So the Creator came down simply to see how creation was, to see if the trees were growing the way they should, to see if the animals were happy, to see if the fish were still in the waters, to see how the air was, everything. Even the people, he was going to check on the humans. And all day he wandered through the forest. And as he wandered, everything seemed pretty good. But there was something that was missing. And he couldn't quite figure it out. And all day he looked, and he was puzzled by this. till finally, as the sun was setting in the west, some Guandiso saw an old man came out of his longhouse, and he was carrying a water drum. He started to play the drum, and then he started to sing. It was a beautiful song, and the Creator listened to the words he was saying, and there were words of gratitude for such a beautiful day. And he was saying goodbye to the sun and saying greetings to the moon and the stars. Beautiful song of thanksgiving. It was around that time, as that man was singing, he noticed around him in the trees in the forest were all these birds. And he realized that's what was missing. Everything else had a voice, had a way of singing. Like the humans and the people, they knew how to sing. Even the trees, when the wind blows through, has their own sound, their song. Even the rivers and streams, when the water goes over stones and the boulders, it has their own music. The animals could howl, but those poor birds in that ancient day, they didn't have a means of singing. So that next day, with his powerful mind, he called to all the bird creatures to come for a meeting. And from the four directions they came. Thousands, if not millions, had gathered to hear what the Creator had to say. And they landed on the trees all around San Diesel. And there were so many birds that the trees bent from all the weight. There were that many. When they all gathered, the Creator sat down and he started to speak. And he told them, he says, I noticed you birds, some of you were listening to that old man sing yesterday. Did you like what you heard? They all nodded their heads in approval. Yes, it was so beautiful. He continued, he said, would you like to learn your own songs? And that got their attention. Yes, they got excited. We'd love to learn how to sing. He said, tomorrow at first light in the morning, all of you birds, you fly straight up into the sky until you can no longer flap your wings when you get so tired. A song from up above will come, and that will be yours forever. And the birds that make it to the highest point will have the most beautiful song. And the ones that don't get very high will just kind of be average, simple songs. So they're so excited, and that night they were gathered, waiting for the sun to rise in the east. And they were all getting ready for the great flight. And they were all flexing their wings and checking their feathers and making sure everything was in order. Just like a big marathon, they're stretching. And there was that Ogwex, or eagle. That's what we call the Ogwex. That Ogwex, he's strong and he's powerful. He's got massive wings. Even his chest is out, stands high. And he knows it. He's so powerful and strong. He's the biggest, largest bird out of all of them. And he's flapping his giant wings, creating winds that knocked over the smaller ones. And right next to him was a little bird they called the thrush. And that little brown bird, he couldn't take his eyes off that eagle because he was jealous. And he looked at his own wings and his feathers. They weren't that big. Then he looked at that eagle and his power. And he said, he's going to end up with the best song. And my song won't be that nice. So he's very jealous. So meanwhile, that eagle's flapping his wings. His feathers are all fluffed up. And that little bird, that little thrush, he hopped up on top of that eagle's head. And he tucked himself behind his head deep into the feathers. And that eagle was so preoccupied with himself, he didn't feel a thing. Didn't even notice it. And that little bird got nice and comfortable and went fast asleep.
We'll leave this story there for now. Tomorrow on Northern Light, we'll hear the conclusion of Dave Fadden sharing the story of how the hermit thrush got his song.
Time is coming up on 8:25. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. And we've got a few events to pass along to you this Thanksgiving week. There's theater and music happening around our region, as you can imagine, as we head into the holidays. A lot going on. We'll try to share as much of that as we can with you. The Peru Drama Club, it presents The Alibi coming up early next month with a cast of over 30 students from grades 6 to 12. It's one of those whodunits. It's actually 8 short comedies stitched together. Hilarious 10-minute plays put on by these young folks in the Peru area. The show runs December 1st at 7:30 and December 2nd at 2 and 7:30. And if you want more information about the Alibi and the Peru Drama Club, you can check out the website, perudramaclub.org.
I also want to promote coming up at Tawny. I always want to do it. I haven't done it yet, but it's the Sugar and Spice Gingerbread Contest. Entries are due at the Tawny Center by 5 o'clock next Thursday, but pre-registration is appreciated by the end of this week. The exhibit will open at the beginning of December, and winners will be announced on Saturday, December 30th. You can find out more at tawny.org. That is their Sugar and Spice Gingerbread Contest coming up. And also coming up on Friday after Thanksgiving, take a load up and head over to the Arkell Museum in Canajoharie, New York, and help them craft their winter decorations for the library. They say, help us cut out snowflakes, craft garlands, and make bows in preparation for December decorating. Many hands make light and fun work. Won't you help us bring the cheer? You can find out more from the arkellmuseum.org.
Jam Crackers, Peggy Lynn, Dan Duggan, and Dan Berggren have a concert coming up on Saturday, December 2nd, 8 p.m. at Cafe Lena in Saratoga Springs. And then they've got a holiday concert at the UU Church in Canton coming up on December 9th. And as this is Thanksgiving week, I want to share Peggy's wonderful song called Giving Thanks. This is from the album Be the Light. This is Peggy Lynn.
In this season of joy and thanksgiving, when I look at the life I am living, I count up the blessings of old friends and new. I am grateful for you. When I look at the life I am living, I count up the blessings of old friends and new. I am grateful for you. I give thanks for you. You're the healing dreamers, protest screamers, bright smile beamers with mirth in your hearts. You're the psalm singers, belly laugh bringers, liberty bell ringers, that's what you are. In this season of joy and thanksgiving, when I look at the life I am living, I count up the blessings of old friends and new. Scolders who won't miss a note. You're the storytellers, timid tear-wellers, fart smeller, smart feller, telling a joke. In this season of joy and thanksgiving, when I look at the life I am living, I count up the blessings of old friends and new. and I am grateful for you.
Peggy Lynn and Dan Duggan giving thanks. Time coming up on 8:30. Thanks for listening.
Yes, I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. Be well.